The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Can you hear? Can you hear? Okay. It is 7 o'clock, and this is Emily Booth, and I have Pat Rosenberg here with me. Thanks all of you for joining us this evening and taking time out from your busy day to listen to the webinar training session 2. Let me go over a few details for you. You are in mute mode. If you have a question that you'd like to ask that you want us to address or some sort of a response, then if you'll type that in the sidebar box, then Marcus Leon is with us, and he is going to monitor that screen and answer any questions and if there are any technical problems that may occur. Marcus will respond, or he will let Pat and I know if there's a question up there that needs to be addressed to the general group. We started promptly at 7. We will get done promptly at 8. I know your email said 7 to 8:30, but that's to allow for any technical difficulties, which last week we think we got those things worked out. I'd like to start this webinar training session 2 with a prayer. May God make this new technology go well and provide inspiration to all of us who work with His children. Give us wisdom and strength to impact His children in a possible way. Grant us the strength to deal with adversity and the wisdom to show others His way. Amen. Now, for most of you, you went through the one-on-one personal whole and healthy children training that we did through September, October, and November. This is a new venue to get the training out to all of you in a way that is the most user-friendly. What we are going to do at the close of this session is there will be a link that will come to you, and it will also come to the people that did not actually get to attend this webinar training. For those that signed up but couldn't make it, there will be a link that is sent directly to their email addresses. There will also be a resource guide, a mentor resource guide, that will be available to you on the Mission Houston website. And this is the backup because this training is an hour. One of the things that was requested was we need activities and other things that we would like to use with our children. So with that is what's going to be up on the webinar, and it's going to be specific books and activities that will be posted on the Whole and Healthy Children website. Now, with that, what we are going to cover today, and this is our agenda. We're going to talk about developmental assets, and we have Pat Rosenberg, who is the contact for the Search Institute and the developmental assets. Now, you may be asking yourself, what are developmental assets? She is going to spend some time going over that with you. Then we are going to talk about phases of the mentoring relationship. We are also going to talk about what are some of the norms and characteristics of 6 to 9-year-old children. Most of us, and of course our mission is really directed towards children that are in 1st through 3rd grades. But because of the length of the program, we literally have some mentors that have followed their children even on into junior high. And so the questions come up, okay, I started with my child when he or she was in 3rd grade. Now they're in 6th grade. What do I do now? So we're discussing those. You'll also notice we're going to go over questions, books, and activities, which will also be up on the website. So, with that, I'd like to start off with this quote that I think summed up what we are about in the Whole and Healthy Children program. Some of us have been doing this for a short time, and some of us have been doing this for a long time. But however long we have been doing it, we know that it requires lots of love and lots of attention towards the children that we deal with on a daily basis. And I don't know how many of you have noticed in your classrooms that you are not only impacting the child that you are mentoring, you're also really impacting the whole classroom, because all the children, at least based on my experience, notice that there's something special about having loving, caring adults that are in their classrooms and dealing with them. So the big question that the mentor coordinators, which we asked of them, was, what do our mentors need next? And that was the question that we of Whole and Healthy Children asked, and the way the coordinators responded is, we need practical things, questions to ask, and things to do to build relationships with our mentees. And we need them to be age appropriate. So that's what you're getting, and it's been based on that feedback. Now, the Search Institute is a known entity. They've been around, and they have been doing work with what does it take to make for a whole and healthy child for at least a decade. And we're fortunate enough to have Pat Rosenberg, who some of you may already know because of her her involvement in some of the school districts as a resource for us, and also to have another voice besides me that for this training. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Pat, who is here with me tonight.
Emily, I can't begin to tell you how happy and excited I am to be here. And it's really great to have the opportunity to speak with you tonight and to speak with all these wonderful folks who are going out into our schools and making wonderful relationships with kids.
Okay, we're having some slight technical difficulties here, but we'll take care of this shortly. So one of the questions that always comes up is, what is my role as a mentor, and what do I need to do? Because you may find yourself in situations where you are uncertain, and in general there are some basic guidelines that we need to and want to stay with that make for good relationships. I like to cite this example of a situation that I faced. I have a 6-year-old. I actually have 2 children that I mentor at Churn Elementary. One is a 6-year-old, and the other is a 4-year-old. And the 6-year-old is more, I guess, challenging to me because, well, you've got to figure that at least part of the reasons why we have the children that we have is they're high risk for a number of different reasons. And one of the things when we talk about trying to avoid making judgments when situations come up, on Monday, I came in Monday after these Christmas holidays, and my 6-year-old had yellow hair, and he had gone with his father to over the Christmas holidays, and his father opted to put peroxide on his hair and dye his hair yellow. And needless to say, the mother was not happy. So how do I deal with that? So these are situations no one can really prepare you for. But the one thing that we can prepare you for is that always be flexible.
I hope you can hear me now. This is Pat Rosenberg, and I wanted to say how pleased I am to be included in this opportunity to work with Emily and Marcos here, and also to speak with you about what an important role you're playing in the lives of children, not just the child that you are tutoring, but as Emily said, the whole entire class. I have mentored for about 3 years a young man, and I just recently had him be with me in a presentation, and he actually said, when he was talking about our relationship, he said, I watched Miss Pat, and when she came into the school, she smiled at everybody. And people wondered who she was, and I didn't mind telling them she's my mentor. So smiles that you give are noticed, and they really make a difference in a child's life. You never know what's happened before they came to school. I've had people at school say, oh, the little boy comes to school every morning crying and almost gets shoved out of the car. And so you are that bright and shining face that is there to help them through the day, and somebody they can look forward to seeing. And that's what's so important. Search Institute is an independent, nonprofit, non-sectarian organization. And Dr. Peter Benson is the researcher behind the 40 developmental assets. Now you say 40, wow, I can't remember 40 things, but really these are the building blocks of what you had in your life, and chances are you've given to the children that you've raised, or to nieces and nephews, or cousins, or other children that you interface with all the time. That is you're providing a caring person for them, someone else to listen to them, someone to remember them. And it's just the Search Institute has done research to figure out what these are and how many it takes to create a healthy, thriving child. And I think that's what is really critically important. These assets have been adopted by several school districts in the area, so that teachers and counselors and faculty know about them. But besides that, the United Way and the youth serving agencies that work with the United Way have also adopted this framework, so that when we're talking about kids, we will talk about supporting children, empowering children, boundaries and expectations, constructive use of time. All of these things are ways that we can use a common language between all of us. And that's what's critically important. These assets are research-based. They've given a survey to millions of children, and these kids have said how many they have, and the average number of assets kids have, whether you're in the city, in the urban area, in the rural area, is only 19 of these 40. So our kids are deficit with these, but hopefully with all of us using the same language and giving the same kind of things, we're going to help children resist some risky behavior and also build their strengths. So these are the nutrients for a strong mind and body. Support would mean exactly what you can imagine. It is they have people around them who support them and care about them.
and appreciate them.
Now, I'll tell you, since I've been working in this area, I have been amazed at the number of children who don't get to even celebrate a birthday. Something that you and I take for granted, something that we wouldn't miss one of our kids' birthdays. We wouldn't miss giving a Christmas gift, but that's not the case for all children. So those are the simple kinds of support that aunts and uncles give with birthday cards or a phone call to say happy birthday. These children sometimes don't get that. Empowerment. The young people need to feel valued and valuable. This happens when they feel safe and respected. And not all of our kids come from a safe environment, and the school is the safest place they can be. Boundaries and expectations. It's really, really important that the young people have clear rules and consistent consequences for breaking those rules, and encouragement to do their best. And sometimes, as parents who want to give a lot, we sometimes forget that we also need to have those strong boundaries and reinforce each other's boundaries. So, and then constructive use of time. Constructive use of time has been one of the most important ones that teenagers that I work with value, because they don't realize how much time they're wasting. And that's where you play an important part, and you understand, because the assets actually suggest that students should spend at least 1 hour a week in a faith-based institution. And so they encourage that kind of activity for young people. And hopefully you all have places where there can be some other kinds of good activities for them. Now those are the external assets, and those are the ones that we can all give and help provide. But the internal assets is how we can encourage young people to have a commitment to learning. And they need to be encouraged to learn things because it's fun to learn, and that it's interesting to learn. So a commitment to learning is very important. Positive values. Young people need to develop strong guiding values or principles to help them to make healthy life choices. Social competencies. Here's another great place where you can help to be a model for these children. They need the skills to interact effectively. So when you go, you always need to make sure you're doing a lot with please and thank you, and modeling the behavior that you would like to see happen with that child, because they're watching you and they are learning from you. And then a positive identity. They need to believe in their own self-worth. They need to believe that they have a strength. So it's always best when you're working with a child to encourage them in something positive about them and have them develop or to find something that's positive about them that you can comment on. So I wanted to let you know what school districts I know that are actively using the 40 developmental assets. And we're adding to these on a daily basis. A-Leaf ISD was one of the earliest adopters, and they've really put this in place in a wonderful way. Fort Bend ISD has also done some trainings and been very working in this area. Galena Park, Houston ISD. Katy ISD is just starting. In fact, I was with their head of counseling today, and they're just beginning this. Klein ISD is another one that's just beginning to move in this direction, and they have a wonderful person out in that area by the name of Angie Mintz who's working on that. And Spring Branch is really a wonderful example of how the whole district has embraced it. And they even have a social emotional coordinator for the district. And it's part of their strategic plan. So I have to tell you that you will be working hopefully in some of these school districts, and maybe you can be the person that can help us bring it to the school district you're in. I know right now in Texas we have a lot of work around this in the Dallas ISD area and Garland ISD. Corpus Christi is another hotbed of lots of stuff going on. And then over around in Kerrville, Partners in Ministry over in that area has adopted the assets and have worked to bring lots and lots of training to that area. So you're part of a growing network and you're on the ground level, and I think you're going to find this information is going to be helpful for your children who may have children. The assets are available in Spanish. You may have people that you come across, parents of the kids that you're working with, that you may want to let them have them in Spanish so that they know how they can add to their child's life. I gave the list and a book to someone I know from El Salvador, and when her parents gave her money for Christmas presents for her child, instead of buying another video game, the mother went out and got ballet lessons. So those are the kind of things that you can help, and we know those are things that we've done for our children and we find are helpful. But there's many, many parents that don't know how to level the playing field. So I encourage you to go to the search website and try to find as much as you can about the assets, and I think you'll find lots of really interesting material.
Thank you, Pat, very much. There are a couple of questions that came through on the webinar that Marcus gave me. One is, will the mentors get explanatory notes containing primary points presented in this webinar? And the answer is yes. If everything is in the note page mode in the PowerPoint, and the backup is actually embedded in the PowerPoint. One of the other points before we move on that I'd like Pat, I'm kind of hitting her with this, she didn't expect it, is why is it important to make sure, Pat, or why is it important to have consistency in, because I know part of what the Search Institute does is to try to get consistency between the school districts, the after-school care, and then the churches, which is what we're, our role. Can you kind of explain that to our mentors a bit?
Well, we kind of feel it's very important, and the research shows that we need to have, every child needs at least 5 people in their life besides their family that know them well, can call them by name, and know something about them, and that care about them. We know that when we had families who lived all in the same community, that was fairly easy. Grandma was there to say, I love you, and then there was Auntie who could do that, and we had neighborhoods who you didn't mind going out and telling those children not to do something, because we all had those same rules and regulations and boundaries, so to speak. But things have changed. We don't live in the neighborhoods that are quite as safe. We don't let our children outside quite as much, where they can experience, and people kind of watch out for each other's children. They're more insulated in their own house. So you can imagine what an impact we can have if every child we come in contact with, we look them in the eye and we say something encouraging. I can't begin to tell you how checkers at the grocery store like to be called by name, look up and say, well, hi, Melissa, how's your day going? She is so surprised that somebody is actually seeing her as a person rather than just a part of the machine. So it's valuing each other and showing that young person that you value the fact that they're working hard to probably go to school or to do something where they can better themselves. So the language of support and constructive use of time, if we all start focusing on that, we might have a better chance of helping more kids succeed in school and succeed in life.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it, and I wanted the mentors to kind of have an overview of why these things fit together. Real briefly, based on the feedback that we got from last week's session, I'd like to talk briefly, and Pat, feel free to fill in, and the 4 basic stages, and you can see that I got this out of a book. It's called Common Phases of a Mentoring Relationship. And that for those of you, and I myself am going through stage 3 with my 2 little guys, and it was helpful for me to look this up and to see it. First of all is the beginning of the relationship. Some of you, or probably most of you, have been doing this since the beginning of the year. And if that's the case, you may not be in the beginning. You're well past the beginning of the relationship piece. Now, what that means is, in that stage anyway, it's important at the beginning of the relationship to be aware of your feelings about age and culture and lifestyle differences, to be non-judgmental. We've talked about all this. To be available and open and about what you cannot do. In the second phase, and my guess is that a lot of you are either in phase 2 or phase 3, building trust. Now that you've got your mentee and you've got some shared experiences under your belt, you and your mentee may experience greater trust at this point. As a result, he or she may share more information with you than you're used to having them share before. And this is when it's important to not be shocked no matter what you hear. And the strategy at this stage, to be patient, to expect some setbacks, to be consistent and reliable, and always to remember to treat your mentee as capable. In other words, whatever the obstacle is, that you have confidence in their ability to solve whatever problem may come their way. Then the next stage, and this is where I am with I personally am with my 6-year-old, is that you've got a trust built, and that the child is all of a sudden beginning to test boundaries. And deep down, he or she may want to see just how much power this relationship has. So, and particularly, this is me talking, particularly if they're used to adults letting them down. They're much more likely to test once you move into this stage, because they want to see just how powerful is this relationship going to last. And they may even begin to make inappropriate requests of you. Things like asking to take things home that they know they shouldn't be asking to take home. Maybe asking you to bring things or buy things for them that they've never asked you to do before. And the strategies for this, first of all, don't take that testing personally. It's important to reinforce the limits if necessary, and also to remember to reaffirm your intention to stay in the relationship. Then the stage 4, I guess, is the increasing independence. Once you have come through the trust building and relationship testing, you may find your mentee becoming less dependent on you. Now, a strategy to deal with that is point out to the child the strategy and behavior that you're observing, and to reinforce that that maybe your mentee is starting to look to other people for relationships. Then that's not necessarily a bad thing. In matter of fact, it can be a good thing, right, Pat?
I would think so. I mean, they are trusting you, and now they're feeling like you're going to be there for them. Now they are happy to see you, and they may want to encourage you to support some of their other friends. So I would think, and you know, it's good. They haven't had anybody who has stood up for them and helped to nourish them. So now they're starting to feel good, and that's a powerful thing. They're feeling empowered. Okay, thank you for that.
We have another question that came through, and the request is, will we also receive a link to the 40 assets and to practical tips for applying them in our mentoring? I think when you see that on the webinar, mentor training, the backup, all the 40 assets are on there with in great depth, as well as specific activities and that link to specific assets. We can also put up the link to the Search Institute website, and you'll note as we go through this, at the very end of this overhead, as well as in the material, there are specific books with links to those books that hook into the Search Institute website. And then I've actually taken things out of some of the key books, and they're designated what asset they play into. But we will also, since there's a request, we'll give you the direct link to the Search Institute website.
I really, excuse me, Emily, I really do want to stress that the website, once you start navigating through it, there is so much information there. The assets are also available in several languages, not just Spanish, but you can get it in other languages too. So that's really important. And it's important to note that there's many, many downloads. You can take many of the things that they have there and print them off yourself and share them. And it's really a wonderful resource. There's also a Most Valuable Parents website, MV Parents, which will give you some helpful tips too, you know, for your grandchildren, or tell your kids about them, for your grandchildren or your own children. But they cover topics of my child doesn't want to do their homework. How can I get them to do the homework? So that MV Parents is another very valuable website.
And while we're talking about websites, there is a very good link. It's to the Institute of Spirituality that you get to through the Search Institute website. And there's some very good information. There's actually even a link, and I can't remember, it's a Lutheran church that has Bible verses, and it's actually a Sunday school program that they use it's a Lutheran program, and that has Bible passages as well as specific recommendations on things to do for for developing certain assets, not just spirituality, but all of them. Is that right, Pat?
Exactly. And one of my cohorts that's worked a lot with the assets and with mentoring has actually used that website to do a Sunday school class. So you can do Sunday school classes within your faith-based organizations within your church, and really come up with some wonderful ways to network. One of the things that my church happened to do was they created a summer day school for parents to drop kids off. It was a 3-week day school camp, and they had their juniors, well, they had their high school where the counselors and the leaders, and they let them do the crafts with the children. Of course, there were adult people there to support and mentor these kids. The youth actually were very empowered to teach the Bible lessons and to help out. They got to make a little bit of money because the people actually paid. And if you have worked around children, you know how much they love being around a child that's 2 or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years older than them. And so there's a lot of mentoring that happens when you have your senior high kids helping your middle school kids, and then the middle school kids helping the elementary, and they are assistants in the art room or assistants in the food room or the outside playroom. So you can create some wonderful activities at your church that would be very, very meaningful for empowering youth.
All right, thank you very much.
And we're going to briefly go over, we've talked about the common phases of a mentoring relationship. We also have another question here before we get into this. I'm just going to reinforce listening again. I can't quite read this, Marcus.
Can the mentees teach offer insight into the mentee that will help us direct our efforts?
Can the mentees what?
Teacher offer insights into the mentee that will help.
Okay, this is a good question. Somebody asked if the mentee's teacher could offer insights into the mentee that would help direct our efforts, which is a very good question. And every school that we've been in, the principal has told us that the teacher is the one that can give you insight into the child. Now the issue is always, and Pat is shaking her head because she knows the same thing. Those of us that, and I know we have a lot of mentors that have taught at one point. I will tell you that most of the time, I don't know about you folks, but the teacher's usually so busy when the children are in there that what all the principals, at least that I've talked to, will say, if you really want to know something about the child, your best bet is to email the teacher. And that's been my experience, is that the teachers are pretty good about emailing you, but to stop class and give you information, it's kind of difficult. How about you, Pat?
I think that that's an excellent idea about the emailing, because that's, teachers can answer those when they have the time, even in the evening or whenever. Another thing would be is to drop a note in their school mailbox. And you might say, I'm going to be working with Tasha, and I just wanted to let you know that I would appreciate any insights that you might want to share with me. Do I need to encourage her in some area? What does she like? Just give me a little bit of a help, and I think teachers will see that you're on the same team with them, and they will be willing to give you any assistance they can.
Let's talk briefly, in the interest of time, let's talk about listening. And we know, based on communication with everyone and in the various phases of the mentoring relationship, everything starts and ends with listening. And so that's why I am reinforcing the importance of active listening. Now, and actually Pat and I discussed putting these slides in. So we talked earlier about, remember I made the comment about my little guy with the yellow hair, and be prepared when you ask a question for the unexpected answer. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is, no matter the age of the child, expect the unexpected answer. So that means that that answer may be outside your frame of reference, and that the answer may actually bother you. If the answer bothers you, just listen, because the value that's being reflected may be disappointing to you. But that listening is the key, and that make sure you understand the reason that the child is giving, and even if you paraphrase to make sure that you understood what you heard, that's not the same thing as making a judgment. By paraphrasing what you heard to make sure you had heard it correctly. Pat, would you like to add to this?
Well, and I wouldn't hesitate to say to
the child that, you know, I've never thought about that, and I'm going to have to think about that before I can really decide how I feel about it. So you can always say, you know, I think that really surprises me, or you could say, I want to hear more about that. Just continue to say, I want to hear more, or, you know, do you feel like sharing additional information, or just try to be accepting, and then you can go back. We don't know where these children are coming from and what they may have seen or what they might have experienced. In this work, I've been at schools where children the night before have had gunshots fired in their neighborhoods, outside their doors. So it's not the world we might want them to live in, but it's the reality, and so we just need to listen.
I'd like to move on to developmental norms, and briefly we are going to go over the developmental norms and that those things and we're dividing these things by age group. The first group that we're looking at are the 6 through 9-year-olds. And just briefly, there are about 5 areas. And by the way, this is all up in your handout that's going to be up on the website in much more detail. And you'll have the developmental norms as well as the 40 assets in detail on this handout that's going to be available to you. There are really 5 areas, but we're going to focus on 3. And the ones that you probably are going to be the most familiar with, you have the intellectual, you have the emotional, and you have the spiritual. On the spiritual side, and this for most of you that have come to us through your churches, which is the case for most of our mentors, children during the ages of 6 to 9 begin to wonder more about the world around them. And they are more likely to ask why things happen. Your child may ask cause and effect questions like, what happens after Grandpa dies? Or what will happen if somebody breaks a window? These are opportunities for you to share spiritual and ethical, well, first of all, do some ground checking, and then at that point give them some feedback like, well, in what you know, in my church, what we believe is. So that kind of thing is allowed. That is in my background, and those are the kinds of things that you are allowed to say in public school. Beyond that, if they begin to ask questions and more questions, then you can share those things with them. So children at this age also begin to notice that friends may have different spiritual practices than they do. But they still tend to be very self-centered. So it's always in terms of what's I'm about. But they do begin to notice the world around them. So there are opportunities there for you to bring up things that have to do with spiritual development. Then when they get to be in the 10 through 14-year-old age, then in this particular age range, they begin to see, on the spiritual end, they begin to see contradictions in the world and in religious and spiritual beliefs. Many will confront and question these contradictions. Some question or reject their childhood beliefs as they move beyond black and white thinking. So what you may see is children whose moms and or dads have taken them to church every week, and they're going, all of a sudden they begin to balk because they're questioning everything, which is a developmental thing, not just because they are, heading towards junior high or already in junior high. Then they also try on different beliefs and ideas, and they even may begin to develop strong and even contradictory beliefs as they try these things on. They begin to rely more on friends and other adults to shape their spiritual beliefs and practices. And as a lot of you already know, in many religious traditions, this is when intense religious training usually happens, because during this period of time is when kids tend to sort out their beliefs. Do you want to add anything to that, Pat?
Well, I
my own when she was in 8th grade, and they were having a special retreat at church. And she said, Mother, I don't want to go. And I said, well, I want you to go. And we were both rather hard-headed, and she managed to close her door and put a chair in front of it so she wouldn't have to go. And I said, well, if you don't go, you can't go to the 8th grade dance. So these are common things. These are things that happen all the time. And what happened is I told her she had to go for 3 hours and then she could come home. So I took her and I went back to get her in 3 hours, and she said, you know, I think I'd like to stay overnight. And I went back the next morning and I said, you ready to go? She said, no, I think I'll stay till noon. So we all have to remember all of those instances that we've been through and know that this is what is normal for kids, and just remember maybe how we even felt.
Okay,
for
thank
that.
you for that.
We also got another question here. How do you get, can you give a layman's description of definition of developmental norms? Yes, that's my, sorry, that's my teacher kicking in on the developmental norms. All that means is a developmental norm is what you can expect from someone for a child at a certain age level, and it's based on, there are a number of people that the most probably well-known one in educational circles is Piaget, and these norms were set, if you will, for observing children over long periods of time and saying, this is what is, quote, normal for a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. And usually there's a bigger breakout, though, because things are not that clear-cut. So there, if on the resource material that we have for you, there's even more definition than what I just described, but developmental norms, that's all it means. Big fancy word for this is what you can expect at a certain age group. Now, in the interest of time, what I want to do is I want to take you over, in general, the questions and the books and the activities that we have available for you on the website, and just to give you samples of what we have up there. And part of the reason why I was so excited about the Search Institute website is that, especially with the younger children, it's really hard to find questions, and not so much books, but questions and activities that you can ask that that they can relate to. It's a little bit easier when the children are older, but the greatest preponderance of material that I found was on the Search Institute website, particularly a book that I actually went down to Barnes & Noble and purchased, but it's also available through the Search Institute. For those of you that have K through 9, the book that I really like is called Building Character from the Start, 2001 Activities to Foster Creativity, Literacy, and Play. Okay, and it's particularly helpful with questions. One of the things that I heard one of the big school districts, the person that's over all the mentors, tell a group is that kids, particularly when they're little and they're not used to having very much attention focused on them, you're going to do a lot better with getting them to bond to you and to talk to you if you're doing an activity with them. And one reason why I really like this book is it's a series of Finish the Picture, and some of these Finish the Pictures, it's up on this resource material. And it'll be a picture that they can color, and you can color it with them, and they're reproducible. And then it's the questions are, and then I'll show you on the next slide. And then once the child is drawing, or you don't have to have them drawing, but the next thing that you can do is you can, there are other questions you can ask as the child is drawing. So here's some sample pictures, if you will, the Finish the Picture. One of them is draw a picture of someone who takes care of you when your family is not present. And then as the child is drawing, it has sample questions that you can ask the child as they're drawing. So I think that's pretty neat It can be really, they can be used for older children, but with the little ones, they really like to do the drawing part while they're talking. Pat?
I'd also like to interject that this is
talking almost any child. Interaction between generations is usually easier when you're doing something. So if you even think about your own children, think about when you're driving the car or carpool, that's when kids will talk to you. You're doing something, they're riding along. Think about baking and cooking, how that's a really good time to share with your own children. So the drawing and doing those little activities or playing a game, it's really a great way for an adult to interact with a child.
Next. Okay. Then also on this same website, there are some very good books, and I've given you a whole list of books that's on the website, on our resource material. The thing that's kind of nice about the books, it'll give you a sample book, and then it'll tell you questions that you can ask or give you ideas of questions that you can ask to get the child to talk more and give you more information about them. These are books that you can typically find in the school library, and I know that at least in the school where I am, they're perfectly fine with you taking the child to the library and picking out books for them, although they don't want you to, let the child can't take the book home. In some of our schools, like for instance in Gordon, the principal, that's really part of what she likes to see the mentors do is read to the children. So there's a whole list of books that you can do and questions that you'll find in that resource material. Additionally, in that same book, there are some sample activities for 6 to 9-year-olds. There's one up here. It's called Human Bingo. This one is sort of designed for more than one child, but you can do bingo with just you and one child. I know I'm planning on doing that in the next 2 sessions with my little guys. Now, moving on to the next age level, and I am going to let Pat talk about these next 2 books briefly because they're ones that I know she has a lot more knowledge of. One is the sample questions for the Conversations on the Go.
Conversations on the Go was written by Mary Ackerman at Search Institute, and she actually has been working with them for a long time. And so this is some sample questions that you can really have a lot of fun with. And this might even help with trying to communicate with your own grandchildren or teenagers. It might be, what is your favorite music? Oh, you like that kind of music. Well, have you ever heard of Glenn Miller? And they'll say, no, who's Glenn Miller? And you could say, well, I'd like to share some of my Glenn Miller with you. Would you share some of your music with me? So it's bridging the gaps and learning about each other. I mean, they'll be thrilled to death that you want to share something that you like. Also, they're very tech savvy, and you might say, well, this is my favorite book, and why don't you look it up on the internet and see what you think of it and see if you think you'd like to read it. All kinds of things like that. I mean, they can go out and look up things for you, and that might be a good way to also start interacting. Say, I'd like to know more about this, and I know you're studying it in your classroom. Maybe you could give me a few guidelines. So this book of Conversations on the Go is really a lot of fun, and some of the things you would never even thought about are in that book. It's kind of like, when was the last time you giggled? And what caused you to giggle? And, when you ask the child that, they're going to come up with something, and then you can say, well, you know, the last time I giggled was with such and such. So there's all kinds of clever ways to bring in. And then what are 3 creative ways to say no to your friends when you're asked to do something wrong? You know, that we all know you can say, well, I've got to think about it, or I can't go out because my mom said no, or I have to go to somebody's house or whatever. So you can, there's all kinds of creative ways that you can help them keep themselves safe too. So it's a fun book to look through, and possibly you can get one and share with others. And then, Emily, do you have some books to share for other kids?
Yes. Also, one of the things as a matter of fact, out in Sci-Fair, it was mentioned a collection of books, and there are 2 different authors. These books are also up on the website, and the questions, these gentlemen are ministers in their various churches, and they're obviously youth ministers. And I found, and you'll see the resources up on the website, that here's one: choose your top 3 500 dynamic discussion starters to get your teenagers talking. There was one that was recommended by one of the mentors in Sci-Fair that was, I think it was 201 questions to ask teenagers. And really, if you look at them, it's not just teenagers. You can ask most of these things from 10 through 14-year-olds. Maybe not so much a lot younger than that, but there are a number of books and great questioning techniques and as well as questions in general that are located in these books. Okay,
I have a question.
Yes.
And my question is, do you really think that teens want to hear Glenn Miller or old school music? Well, I happen to think that everybody should want to hear Glenn Miller because he was born in my hometown in Iowa. So see, there again is another connection. You can always start a conversation about where were you born, or I was born here. Have you ever heard of such and such? It's just another conversation starter. They might think you're kind of silly, but, you know, there's many ways that we appear silly to these kids.
Moving on, and on the sample activities to go, and I'm going to let Pat talk briefly about this one. It's the companion book to Conversations on the Go.
And activities on the go is, well, the first activity I've confused with Conversations on the Go is also the music sharing. And then sharing journal entries, things you discover about yourself through journaling, how to make a dream board with your mentee. This is a brand new book. It just came out this past about 3 months ago. So it's a really nice, I've given it to the AmeriCorps workers here in Houston that work with after school because it gives them some nice ideas on how to build some good relationships in that particular way.
What I would like
to finish up with is the list of resources that you have available that you also have. It's in the handout as well as in this slide. Actually, here is the Search Institute web. It's on the resource page. And this is a representation of a lot of the books that we've used for this webinar. And there are more that are up on the that will be on the resource guide that you have. Now, what I'd like to do is to ask Pat if she has anything now that she would like to add, and that if not, to thank her so much for being here. And
I really want to say thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that you will really understand how much these children need you, and they may not be able to express, but as an adult telling you thank you for what you're doing, it's extremely important.
Thanks all of you for being here.
And I'd like to end with a prayer. Thanks to all of you wonderful people for being here today. May your good works change the course of the city's children, one child at a time. Good night.